Hello and welcome to another edition of the Next Gen podcast. I'm your host, Nick Leese, founder of Next Gen Benefit Solutions. If you're a bit of a nerd, I think you're going to like this episode. This episode, we're going to talk about technology, change, disruption, and how it's impacted society. But then we're also going to draw it back to how it impacts you when you're looking at your employer health plan. And the plan that you sponsor for your employees. We're at a crux in time to where disruption's kind of a norm. You know, if we look back to one of the most notable and earliest big disruptions that people remember, it's Henry Ford. And that's part of why I'm doing this hot podcast in July, is because his birthday was July 30th. And Henry Ford, in some ways, is a guy that I admire. And one of the things I admire most is that he had a desire to ask questions and to always question everything. Really, the automobile came from the fact that he questioned, isn't there a better way than horse and buggies? Can't we do this differently? And then he set his mind to figuring out how he could. And that's a trait that I like to think that I have a lot in myself. I always joke that I came out kicking, screaming, and questioning everything. And that has set me up for a lot of success. And it set my clients up for a lot of success. Because I'm not going to just keep doing what we've been doing because that's what we've been doing if it's not working. I'm always going to be looking for new ways that we can leverage new technologies, that we can rethink how we're doing something so that we can make it better, so that we can create a more cost-effective health plan for my clients, so that we can help them be more compliant, so that we can help them get better employee satisfaction from the benefits that they work so hard to offer. And again, a lot of that comes back to questioning everything, just like Henry Ford did. And we can look at a lot of other innovators over time and see that they all had the same thing, where they were looking at how can we do things differently. And they weren't afraid to go get their hands dirty and spend a lot of time figuring out how better could actually happen. Now, the opposite side of this disruption and change is what we call the status quo. And in its most simplest form, status quo is really just a acceptance of the way something is. It's the lack of desire to change. But is that lack of desire to change, is that actually a lack of desire that you have, or maybe that your employees have, or that society has in general? And I would challenge that society really doesn't have a significant pessimism to change. A lot of times it comes down to a few players that are holding up change. So when we look at Henry Ford, can you imagine the wagon makers back when Henry Ford was making his car? From history, I can tell you that the first thing they did is they laughed at him. They told everybody out there, Henry's a spectacle. He's trying to do something that can't be accomplished. He's an idiot. But then Henry was successful. He did figure out a way to make it work. So the next thing they told people is that, they're not reliable. They're not as reliable as a horse. You know, a horse doesn't break down like a car breaks down. So you need a horse. You don't need a Ford automobile. But he only made them more reliable. So the next thing is they'll kill people. They go too fast. And while some of that may have been true to an extent, the majority of it was wrong. Just because a car goes faster than a horse doesn't mean it's inherently more dangerous. It's more inherently dangerous when the person going fast in a car instead of a horse is texting and driving. Texting and driving on a horse tends to be a fairly safe thing to do. It's not in a car. But the bottom line is this: the wagon manufacturers didn't want this change to happen because they knew how to make wagons and they didn't want to change. They had a business model, they were making money, they were happy. Now, with all change, there's a little skepticism as first, when it comes to society. But society generally picks up things pretty quickly, especially if they can benefit them. And the motor vehicle took off like a rocket ship as soon as Henry was able to make it reliable, affordable, and accessible to all kinds of Americans. And that's why today we have things like the Cybertruck. Now, if you're like me, the Cybertruck is one half ridiculous, one half really awesome. Why do we need it? I don't know, but the technology that it is super cool. And a lot of the failures of things like the modern day automakers has been that they have been resistant to change. While Elon Musk was out there trying to change the world of how we travel in a vehicle, these other ones were indebted into the way that they were doing things. They were holding close that status quo near and dear to their hearts. But we see more and more people driving a Tesla each and every day or some other type of electric vehicle because some people see value in them. And I'm not going to get into that debate. But what I will do is we'll get on with the rest of this podcast. So the first company that I really want to tie back to employer-sponsored healthcare is Amazon. Amazon, as you know, is direct to consumer. As you also know, there's almost nobody that does not have an Amazon Prime account. As a matter of fact, I think we're at a point in time where if you don't have one, they would effectively call you a unicorn. I'll tell you that I love Amazon Prime. There's certain things that I can't buy here in my local town, and it is much of a benefit to me to be able to do that rather than having to travel several hours to Rapid City or Denver to get to a place that has enough stores to purchase everything that I need. And I'll also admit, I actually have some things on subscription because again, they're not things that I can buy locally, and I can buy them more cost effectively through Amazon than any other online retailer. And it shows up at my door when I need it. So how does that translate into the employer-sponsored space? Well, I think direct-to-consumer is really the key here. And when it comes to employer-sponsored health plans, I think we need to see a heavier reliance on direct-to-business healthcare. And it's one of those things that hasn't been done on a massive scale at this point in time. Most people are still using a traditional network from a big carrier. But the question has to be asked is that the most cost-effective way to purchase healthcare? And is it the best way to purchase healthcare? And the third thing is it the best way to purchase cost-effective, high-quality healthcare? And the fact of the matter is that it's not. While being on one of these big networks means that you can go anywhere and swipe your card and get services, does that always mean that you're getting cost-effective services or quality services? So in a direct-to-business model of healthcare, what that allows to happen is an employer and a healthcare provider to come together, make an agreement between the two of them, absent of an insurance company, and deliver care. And at the end of the day, that gives the employer a ton of power when it comes to making sure that he is helping his employees access quality healthcare. Because it's a lot easier for him to vet a handful of people that are going to do a really good job than it is to vet every single person in the country. And at the end of the day, when you're on these big networks, just because they're in network doesn't mean that it's going to be a quality care experience. Now, the second thing is cost. Just like what Jeff Bezos found with Amazon is that his model allowed less people to have to touch the product in order to get it to the consumer. The same thing happens with healthcare. When we're purchasing a healthcare service or procedure, if we're not having to add in the layers of insurance, the costs go down because it's one less person that has to make money in the equation. So at the end of the day, I think we're going to see a lot of direct-to-employer type models start to come up. I really think that they are the way forward, and we're going to see it more as an Amazon experience of buying healthcare. There's a couple of companies that we work with that are already putting it on a website. You as a consumer literally pick out what you need done. I need to have a elbow surgery. These are the CPT codes and who provides that service. So it's going to tell you who provides that service, what the cost is, what the quality is, and then you can literally add it to your cart and check out, and you effectively just bought an elbow surgery 3 weeks from now. Everything is changing, and I think that when it comes down to it, we need to look at Amazon and we need to look at some of the things they've done and how we can translate that into a better healthcare for your employees. So the number 2 thing is Netflix. Netflix was first known as the company that caused Blockbuster to shake in their shoes right before they filed for bankruptcy. Now, I don't like seeing businesses forced out, and both Amazon and Netflix have done this. But what I do like is seeing the consumer get better because of innovation. And if you ever got a movie from Blockbuster and you were excited to watch it, you got the Goonies, and you were going home, you stuck it in the VCR, and you found out that the person before you didn't rewind it, it's a really terrible experience. It's an experience that somebody who's only ever used Netflix knows nothing about. But just like going back to Henry Ford, the cable companies, Blockbuster, all these different companies were highly resistant. And at first, just like the car, they made fun of Netflix. And then they said, oh, well, you can't get as big of a variety as you can get at Blockbuster. And then the next thing you know, it's the only way people are watching it. The cord cutting became a reality. Everybody was canceling their traditional cable subscriptions. Blockbuster had gone out of business and everybody took the little card off their keychain. Everybody was transitioning to an on-demand type of entertainment. And largely, I think that was good. Now, I will question, as my cost for streaming services continues to go up, of whether it might be more cost-effective to go back to cable, but I don't get that convenience, so I don't. So how does that translate to your employer-sponsored health plan? Well, there's a lot of different companies out there that are doing great things in the pharmacy space. One of them who I've talked about before is the company that backs up our generic optimization program. And what they allow people to do is through a subscription model, they can access any generic medication that they need. And there's a lot of value to this. One is that the cost is substantially less than filling it through the traditional models. And why is that? It's because it's a subscription model. That's how they make money. When you go to purchase the actual medication, you're paying a wholesale price, which is pennies on the dollar, if not even less, for the medication. And a lot of that just comes down to, if we're filling a script through a traditional PBM route, there's multiple layers that a medication has to go through before it gets to the end consumer. And just like anything else, all those layers add cost, even if they're not adding value, or at least a significant value. So by using things like our generic optimization program, we're able to basically get you a direct to wholesaler pricing at a membership fee. So your employees have better access to the medications that they need. They have a more reliable access. Sometimes when a certain medication goes into a shortage, the big cities get the allotments first before the smaller communities like I support and I live in get the medications. When we're doing it through a subscription model, all of the medications are coming out of one place via mail. And because of their volume, they become one of those priority vendors. So they're getting these medications when sometimes even the big box pharmacies in your local town can't get them because your town's too small. So there's going to be a lot of advantages to the subscription type pharmacy models. And I anticipate we start seeing a lot more of the employer-sponsored healthcare space going in this way. One of them that's common is direct primary care. I think we're going to see that continue to really blossom and do better. But at the end of the day, it's all about accessing the care and the medications that your employees need easier and more cost effective. So let's get on to our third one. And this one's really a duo. That's Siri and Alexa. Now, I'll be the first to tell you, I kind of think they're annoying. I don't want Alexa to talk to me, but my in-laws love her. because they can set a timer while they're cooking without ever having to step away from the stove. Some people use it to order the next thing they need from, and you guessed it, Amazon. There's a lot of different things that Siri and Alexa can do, and at the end of the day, they're very basic AI technologies. Now, a lot of people are really afraid of artificial intelligence. And while I'm not necessarily an expert on artificial intelligence, it's something I'm pretty excited about. And one of the things that I believe is true about artificial intelligence is the same thing that's true of social media or so many other things in society. It can be used for good. It can also be used for bad. The fact is that we can't control that. But what we can do is we can leverage good AI to help deliver a better experience for your employees, to help you bring down costs, to really optimize your employee health plan. And we have a couple of different avenues that we're using artificial intelligence. One of them that's been around a little bit longer is using it for an underwriting process. But the one I really want to focus on today is using AI to create a better experience for your employees. And a better experience translates into a higher satisfaction with their health plan. And as we know, the more satisfied somebody is with the benefits they get from their employer, the more likely they are to be loyal to them. But there's a number of different things that artificial intelligence can help us do when it comes to your employees. It can help us educate them better, because artificial intelligence can take real life scenarios that are happening in your employees' lives. Maybe they went to the doctor and AI can identify that claim and reach out with support and help. Maybe it can tell them about a program that you've embedded into your health plan to help them with their diabetes that they forgot about when we educated them at open enrollment. And even though you have a flyer posted in the break room, they don't think about it. But the next time that they go fill their metformin, we can use AI to reach out to them and remind them that they have a diabetic management program. What about when it comes to actually deciphering a network guide? If you've ever gotten one, some of these network guides are massive. It's like a telephone book reinvented. There's so many different names and facilities and everything else that your employee just gets frustrated trying to decipher which one's best and to sift through them. But with artificial intelligence, it can go through that and pick out the best doctors. It can pick out the best prices. It can pick out the best facilities, and it presents those to your employees and allows them to have an easier access to healthcare. So at the end of the day, again, AI is going to be used for bad things, but when it comes to employer-sponsored health plans, I think there's so many great opportunities that you can leverage artificial intelligence to create a better experience and a better satisfaction with your employees. So the last example that I want to talk about is LendingTree. Now, this is one of the technologies that I find less people know about, so I'm going to do a quick explanation of what LendingTree is. LendingTree is a platform where peers are coming together. So maybe you're somebody that has a little bit of extra cash. You're not happy with the interest rate that the bank is paying. So you go to LendingTree and you essentially give your cash to a pool. And in return, they're going to lend out that money on your behalf and pay you a higher interest rate than maybe you get from the bank. So it's a great way for somebody that has that extra cash to make a little bit more on their money, to get that money working for them. Now, the other side is maybe there's somebody that their water heater just went out and they don't have the cash on hand, so they need to go get a loan. But going through the traditional banking system is quite an arduous process. You might get declined. It's bad for your credit history. The interest rates sometimes aren't favorable. So it gives people an easier option to go get a short-term loan for some day-to-day, hiccups or rainy days. It's definitely a lot better than things like a payday lender. But if you can imagine, banks and payday lenders criticize technologies like this because they are missing out. You're taking an opportunity away from them, even though it's better for both parties involved. And where I want to tie that to is how we're financing healthcare. Traditionally, the only way to finance healthcare was to go buy insurance from a big carrier, where you paid a lot of premiums, and if you used it, great, you might have got an awesome value. But if you didn't, it was just money down the road. And so that's why we focus on a lot of different ways that you can alternatively fund these risks. We're a big fan of HRA strategies, which are a kind of a just an entry into the self-funding world, where it allows you to take on a very small amount of risk, but at the end of the day, it can help you save money, all the way up to fully unbundling your health plan, using independent TPAs and using captive arrangements, and really analyzing how we're paying for that healthcare, how we're financing it. At the end of the day, I'll tell you that healthcare is really not that expensive. It only becomes expensive when insurance becomes involved. So to kind of bring all of these together, when we're leveraging things like direct-to-employer healthcare, when we're leveraging things like subscription models for pharmacy and primary care, when we're using artificial intelligence to help your employees make better decisions, to help them access more cost-effective healthcare, to help them access better healthcare, we start to see those costs come down, and that's when the financing actually gets easier. One of the examples I like to say is that whether you're self-funded or fully insured, a $60,000 claim on your group is probably going to have a significant impact. But if we can get that exact same claim for $30,000, that's considerably better. I think we'd all rather pay 30 rather than 60. So at the end of the day, the way that I want to wrap up this podcast is really this. We are at a point in time where the traditional model for employee-sponsored health plans is completely changing. And it's something that we at NextGen Benefits take very seriously and we're very excited about. The good news is that there's a lot of new solutions out there, and there will only continue to be more to help you as an employer better control your costs, to better deliver healthcare to your employees, to ensure that you're doing things like meeting your fiduciary liability and keeping in compliance. And while change can be scary, and you're going to hear different things that are bad about self-funding or bad about direct primary care or subscription pharmacies, what I'm going to tell you is that a lot of the people that are speaking the loudest about that, and a lot of the companies that are speaking the loudest about that, are the ones that have something to protect. I have nothing to protect other than my clients. They're the ones who pay me. So at the end of the day, I go to work for them. And what I can tell you is that these big players, these people that are saying this won't work, you're too small, it's because they have a vested interest in you never changing. So if you want to really take back control of your health plan, you have to be open to change. You have to be willing to embrace some of these newer things, some of these things that aren't at this point in time mainstream business practices. But what I can tell you is these are all things that my clients are using. These are all things that are helping my clients drive down their costs and increase their satisfaction of their benefits within their employee base. So at the end of the day, you have to make your choice. Are you going to be willing to embrace some change and do things differently than you have? Or are you going to keep doing the same thing and getting the same results? That's up to you. That being said, thank you for tuning into this week's podcast. I was excited to have you, excited to talk to you again next week. With that being said, have a great weekend.